Happy Mother's Day to each of the moms out here today, and those of you who are watching from home. Tara, come on up and join me. This is Parent-Child Dedication Day as well. All of our Parent-Child dedications are in the first service and in the third. So today, I've asked Tara, as we continue this series, Growing Great Families, if she would take this last element, believing that she would do a far better job than I could. And after hearing the first one, I knew I was right.
You're sweet.
God bless you.
Thank you. Good morning. Well, several months ago, I was sharing a devotion with Mark, and the devotion was titled, "The Strength is in the Struggle." And after I finished sharing that devotional with him, he looked across the table at me and he said, "Would you share the Mother's Day message this year?" And I tried to convince him that the whole idea of Mother's Day is that most of us moms want to have the day off. But he wasn't buying any of that, so I tried a different tactic, and I said, well, this year my birthday falls the day before Mother's Day, and so for my birthday I'd like to have the weekend off. But he wasn't buying any of that. So that's okay, because I feel privileged to be able to share this message this morning. It's a message that God has been working in my heart and my mind for quite a while now. So I'm grateful. I want to begin this morning by sharing a story. And it's a story about a farmer who had a donkey that stumbled into an old dry well. And this donkey was crying piteously for hours. Well, the farmer tried to determine and sort out what to do with this situation, because the donkey himself was old and the well was a hazard. And so eventually he determined that he'd call his farmer friends over and they'd fill in the well. And that's exactly what they did. So he had them come over, and they took their shovel loads of dirt, and they began to fill that well in with dirt. The donkey seemed to panic and know what was happening, and began to cry loudly and louder than it was even doing before. But then the farmer noticed a strange thing, and he noticed that the donkey was no longer crying out, and it was silent. So he was curious, and he peered down into the well, and what he saw astonished him, because what he saw was that that animal was taking that earth that was falling upon his back, shaking it off, shifting his feet, and rising on the fallen earth. Several hours later, that donkey came up above the edge, the rim of the well, and those farmers were able to pull the animal out, and off that donkey trotted. Now, I ask you, is there any mom, dad, grandparent, or somebody watching online who wouldn't hope and desire that our loved ones, our children, or ourselves included, would be an amazing, resilient creature like that? Well, perhaps the donkey illustration isn't too flattering, but you get the idea, right? The idea that life is challenging at points and dirt is thrown upon us. And the whole idea that that animal was able and managed to rise. Because there will come a time and there will come a day when she does not get that position in the play that she so covets. Or perhaps she doesn't make the team. Or perhaps he doesn't get invited to that party, but he hears all about it. Or he doesn't make the grade or get the girl. Or maybe it's a season when life feels crushing financially, and it's almost as if the creditors are come bearing big shovel loads of dirt piled upon us. Or perhaps it's a time when the illness that we had so hoped would be way far behind us is not way far behind us, but is actually getting worse. Or a time when the marriage feels like it's anything but blessed. Or a time when it seems as if we're being buried alive in our parenting. What do we say then? What do we say to our loved ones? What do we say to encourage ourselves so that we and those we love can be those remarkable creatures who manage to rise above the pit holes and the dirt of life? Well, this morning, I want to look at the Apostle Paul, because the Apostle Paul wrote a letter to the Christians in Rome, and the year was AD 64. And if you know your history, the Emperor Nero was in control at that point, and a massive fire had just come through the city and destroyed nearly 2/3 of the city. And it was commonly believed to be a result of Nero's excessive partying. But in order to suppress those rumors, Nero decided to charge with guilt the Christians in the city of Rome. And the punishment that he inflicted on the Christians in Rome was horrific. You can look back at history and see some of those things. but it was horrible. So it would not have helped the Christian believers at that time to hear a cotton candy counsel. Kind of like the idea that somebody has barely had a cold themselves but is trying to preach the power of positive thinking to somebody who's terminally ill. That wouldn't have helped the believers in Rome at that time. But Paul wasn't like that. And this morning, I want to take a look at where he had been. So we're going to look at 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 23 through 27. Then I'll read that aloud. Paul says, I have worked much harder, been in prison more frequently, been flogged more severely, been exposed to death again and again. 5 times I received from the Jews the 40 lashes minus 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. I spent a night and a day in the open sea. I've been constantly on the move. This is Paul speaking. I've been in danger from rivers, in danger from bandits, in danger from my own countrymen, in danger from Gentiles, in danger in the city, in danger in the country, in danger at sea, in danger from false brothers, and the list keeps going on. I've labored, I've toiled, I've gone without sleep, I've known hunger and thirst, I've gone without food, I've been cold and naked. So in other words, Paul is saying to you and to me, I know what it feels like to be at the bottom of the well with dirt being heaped upon my back. So then, if that's the case, what Paul goes on to share with the Christians in Rome in chapter 5 of Romans, I think is something that we need to take seriously, because he offers principles here that help us to understand, that help to shape those who rise and those who don't. And this is what he says, Romans 5, 3 through 5. But we also rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, and perseverance, character, and character, hope. And hope does not disappoint us because God has poured out his love into our hearts by the Holy Spirit, whom he has given us. Now, to be clear, Paul isn't saying rejoice because of our sufferings. A person who does that would be called a masochist. And there's no biblical evidence that God takes any pleasure in your suffering or in mine or in our loved ones' sufferings. In fact, in the books of Hebrews, it says that for the joy set before him, Christ endured the cross. It wasn't the cross that made Jesus smile, but what lay beyond the cross. And the Old Testament prophets repeatedly stress that God wants to relieve the suffering of his people, and he wants his people to be relief agents, kind of like why Robin was up here sharing about compassion this morning with the poverty and the children who are stuck in poverty. In Revelations, it says that God wants to wipe away, his final aim is to wipe away every tear from our eye, and that there will be no more death and mourning and heartache. That the old order of things will have passed away. So let's be clear. Those who rise above the losses and hurts and the trials and the afflictions of life don't do so because they've learned to enjoy pain. They do so by learning, as Paul did, that in our sufferings, there are lessons that we can learn no other way. Because a persevering spirit doesn't get forged when all our wants and needs are met and everything is good. The persevering spirit gets forged down in that well with dirt being heaped upon our backs. It's when we're given chaos instead of calm, and it's not what we want, it's not what we ask for, it's not what we hope for, but it's in that moment we can decide and determine, do we believe God can bring something good out of that hard and difficult place? Are we going to let God do his transforming work in us and our loved ones when we're surrounded like a cocoon in the darkness? And we see this in nature as well. A child once watched a butterfly trying to emerge from its chrysalis, from the bonds that held it. And it was struggling to break free, and it seemed like such a painful, long process. And this little girl was so moved with pity watching this creature try to break through those bonds. She ran into the house. She ran to her mama's makeup kit and got out a pair of tweezers and ran back to that chrysalis and began to help that insect. She just couldn't take it anymore, and help gently to help that insect get free from that. The insect did fall on the ground, and its wings, wet wings, were plastered against its body as it was wiggling to and fro and trying desperately in vain to rise and to fly. But you see, what that girl couldn't have known was that it was actually the struggle against the chrysalis that was necessary to send vital fluids right into the wings of the insect in order for that butterfly to ultimately rise. And without that struggle, that insect was going to lay on that ground and not able to rise. And just as it is in nature, it is with you and I. In their book, The Cradles of Eminence, Victor and Mildred Gertzel, they attempted to describe and to find the common thread that could account for the phenomenal attainment of 413 famous and exceptional people. The Gertzels expected the link to be something like extraordinary parenting. And then they thought, well, perhaps it might be extraordinary intelligence that they all had in common, or perhaps even extraordinary opportunity. What they actually discovered shocked them. They discovered that 392 of the 413 people they researched were required to overcome great obstacles in their young life to become who they were. So if that's the case, then why do we often long to remove from our loved ones' lives the obstacles that they face, or to give in to rewarding before they've worked long and hard for something? Why am I, as a mom, so tempted to want my girls' road to be easy? I confess, I want to eliminate their struggle sometime, just like that little girl with those tweezers. I want to take my tweezers and just pull apart that chrysalis. I just want to relieve their struggle. So how can you and I recover a sense of the value of perseverance in the midst of suffering and see it presented as a blessing and not merely a curse? A couple of months ago, this was actually played out for me here at church. So it was a Sunday morning, and I went into the nursery, and while I was there was a junior leader who was comforting a little baby, and this little baby was just out of sorts that morning, just kind of crying on and off, and this little baby did not want any of the adult leaders in the room and really made that quite clear. She wanted that junior leader. But this went on for quite a while, and I just kind of watched in amazement at the calm and the cool and the collection of that young girl comforting that baby. And so I said something to her about it. And she said to me, you know, I've learned patience. Through all the medical procedures and the surgeries and the things I've gone through, I've definitely got patience. You see, in that moment, what she was saying to me is, I have, in the midst of this challenging and hard circumstance, something of value. I have patience. But it's not only Paul who gives us this message, because James is telling us a similar message in the New Testament. I want to look at James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4 today. Would you look at that with me? It'll sound familiar, I believe. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. That word again. Perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Now, I don't know about you, but this is typically not my first response to trials and afflictions. I'm just saying, it's not. And these scriptures don't seem to make much sense to us at first glance. And I want to be clear that both James and Paul are not saying that we shouldn't pray that the trial will go away, because in James, he's talking about gathering people around us to pray with us. And Paul himself in the New Testament was praying 3 times to have an affliction and a thorn from his side removed. So they're not saying that we should not be praying to relieve suffering. But what they are saying here, I believe, is that we should remembering that suffering has value. And not just a little value, but great value. And I'm not talking about Walmart kind of great value. It's great value. God says there's value. Perseverance, when exercised over time, day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, produces character. And that's important to God. A couple of years ago, I was sharing with my mom about a challenging situation that one of our daughters was walking through. And I was just telling her, like as moms, it's not fair, it's hard, I just feel she's being misunderstood and all these things. And I was just sharing how hard that situation was. My mom looked at me and she said, "You are so fortunate. You are so blessed." And I'm thinking, she tracking with me? Because I'm telling her it's not easy. This is hard stuff and this is not good. But she went on to say, you get to open the Word of God with her, and you get to direct her and point her and show her how to walk this hard thing out, which is very different than the way that the world would teach. You get to show her how to continue to persevere in this way, trusting God that He is about a good work. At that moment, I knew I had heard truth, and there was a perspective shift for me personally as a mom. But most of us, if we're honest, we would rather have God sprinkle perseverance, character, and hope on our loved ones and ourselves in our sleep. Yes? I'm there. You kind of get it. I want a little character here. Let me get a little perseverance. I'll give you a little bit of hope there. I got it. But unfortunately, character doesn't come in a sprinkle can. You know where character comes? In that hole at the bottom of the well, with dirt being heaped upon us. So, how we view suffering in those moments at the bottom of the well very well may determine whether we and our loved ones rise. And so today I want to look at 3 ways that I believe that even in the midst of hard and challenging trials, struggles, and afflictions, there is value and blessing for us. The first one is that trials can produce greater wisdom. Do you think that donkey fell down that same well? Well, in our story, it was covered in. I get it. But typically, we tend to learn from our missteps. Typically, we tend over time to walk in a much wiser way. And as we tend to walk in a much wiser way, we want to share that wisdom with our loved ones, right? We want to share that wisdom with our kids, with our children, with those around us, family, friends. We want to say, trust me, this is a better way to walk. You don't want to walk that road. And so we desire that the wisdom we learn would be shared with others. Also, trials can produce greater grace and compassion toward others that can be gained in no other way. Think about it. Who is the most comforting and caring friend when you're going through a lost job or a lost child or a relationship that is struggling? Well, you know the answer. It's those who have suffered similarly. Now, perhaps they haven't suffered the same exact thing, but they know suffering. One of my very favorite authors, his name is Henry J. Nouwen, Catholic priest. He's no longer alive. He's no longer living. But he wrote a book called The Wounded Healer. And I've read this book so many times over the years, probably 6 times. And in this book, he talks about the fact that the greatest leaders are those who lead out of their broken and wounded places, not as we would sometimes think from the self-sufficiency of having it all together. Those who have suffered and seek God in their midst and keep their face pointed in His direction often have those tender hearts toward others who are in pain. And often these people become compassionate truth tellers. And finally, trials offer us an opportunity to produce greater intimacy with God. Because when things are going great, how many of us feel as if we really need God? I'm not talking about needing Him for salvation, so don't hear that, please. But what I'm talking about is the fact that when things are going well, we still want God's favor and blessing. But when things are going well for us, we think we can do it. We can handle it. Life is good. God doesn't want us to suffer for suffering's sake, but He is delighted when you and I and our children and our loved ones turn to Him in dependence. You know, it's going to sound crazy, but the saints of old not only embraced suffering, but they also desired it. And that just sounds foreign, probably to most of us here today. But you see, they welcomed it and desired it because they believed it was a place to grow stronger in their love for God. They believed it was a place where they could grow stronger. Because suffering brings us at an end to ourselves, our strength, our resources, our comfort, our control. And so it drives us to the one who is all sufficient. When we're powerless, we're driven toward the one who has all power. And through that suffering, our character becomes pure because it's not about us anymore. It's about him. And God always seems bigger to those who need him. Paul goes on to say that we keep praising not because circumstances necessarily look good, because, quite frankly, often they don't. But we keep praising because when we look forward, outward, and upward, we look past the circumstances that we're in right at the moment to what's possible in the future. And I think Paul was saying to the Christians in Rome, I know what you're going through. I know the suffering you're going through. I get the pain you're going through, but this isn't your final chapter. And that attitude then prepares us to receive what God is about to do next. I have a dear friend who I've known for over 14 years. And through the years, we joke with one another that real is always on the menu with us. Over the years, I have watched her struggle with 3 children who have the same hereditary medical condition. And right now, one of her children has a port that gives intravenous fluids to her to help her. Another one of her children has had a feeding tube for the past 7 years and has almost died multiple times. Another one of her children currently has not been able to be in school since January because of constant fainting spells and a migraine headache that will not break, no matter the fact that they've been in 3 top hospitals and had dozens and dozens of medication thrown at them. The pain is unbelievable. Unbelievable. And to top that all off, she flies solo as a single mom because several years ago her husband came to her and revealed some very sick and unhealthy behavior that shattered the faithfulness of their marriage and had great potential to harm their children. So a couple of months ago, she texted me and she said, I'm mad at God. And I told her that I understood, and I'm sure I'd feel the same way. And then I went directly to her house, and we walked, and we talked, and we cried together. And I don't think I had any really great words of wisdom to share at that moment. But as we began to talk, like it so often does, I began to sense hope beginning to rise again within her, talking about how God was present in their life. And it may not always happens immediately, but it happens time and again. And then several weeks ago, this same friend called me, and in the midst of more ongoing pain with no end in sight, she said on the phone, I don't know if I can hope anymore. And honestly, I get it. Don't you? Because there's times when things seem long and hard and drawn out, and sometimes the seasons are long. And I told her that that was okay for today and that I would hope for her at that point. Reminded her she was loved, and we talked at length. And you know what? At the end of that conversation, you know what she said? I think I can hope again. You see, my friend understands that the painful place that she's walking in and her children are walking in is not the end of their story. She understands that it's a chapter. And sometimes it seems like a long chapter, but it's not the end of her story. She's one of the strongest friends I know, and she's a great mom. And even now, this month, that feeding tube that's been in for 7 years is being removed in a very God, miraculous way. She's seen God, but she's also seen hard. So why do I share this story with you on Mother's Day? I share it because Paul wasn't saying to the believers in Rome that they had to be superhuman and that we have to be super moms. It's my belief that those who rise do so by reaching out when the night is long and our song of praise is very faint, Do you remember when Mark first began this series on growing great families? Do you remember? He was sharing when Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane and asked his friends to pray. And we know that from that story that those friends disappointed him. And that's true. We are going to disappoint one another. I'm going to disappoint you. You're going to disappoint me. I get it. We're not always going to be able to be there for each other. I understand that. But the principle was there. The principle was there that we need each other in the hard times. And we need to reach out, whether it's to a wise mom, a trusted friend, a counselor, a life coach. We need to be able to reach out to another in our great time of need. Well, I want to end our time this morning by sharing a personal story, because many of you know that our oldest daughter has been away for nearly 6 months on a mission opportunity. She left in January, and in the first 3 weeks, she landed in 3 ERs, had an abdominal x-ray, an abdominal CAT scan, and a small surgical procedure. And after the 3rd ER visit, we were told that there was a mass pushing on one of her organs. And so we didn't know for 24 hours what we were looking at. We didn't know if we were looking at a cancer diagnosis. But as Mark and I made plans to fly out to be with her, I called a dear friend of mine who lives in California and asked her to come be with my daughter and be that adopted mom for her. This friend, Kimberly, that I met 30 years ago, we were roommates in San Francisco when she was an intern at UC Med Center as a chaplain, interning as a chaplain at UC Med Center, and I was interning as a chaplain at San Francisco General Hospital. So I knew this friend of mine had much wisdom and much love to share and would be the perfect person to be with our daughter when she didn't really want her mommy and daddy rushing right in yet till we knew what we were looking at. But if I'm honest, I was still a pressure cooker at this time because, as moms, I believe we have a default setting. And this default setting goes like this. My child hurts, I hurt, okay? So I was a little pressure cooker with just tears hanging on my shoulder. And it was one Monday around this time that we had a prayer and worship night here at the church. Part of me felt like I should go. The other part of me didn't want to go. I just felt like the minute they played that music, I was going to be done. Boots, eye sweating kind of thing. But I chose to go that night. And Mark stood and he shared with those who were there the struggle we were walking through. And then 2 women afterwards came and prayed for me, which was a great blessing. But when I left that night, I got another blessing because there was a 9-year-old girl who was there with her parents. And as Mark was sharing the struggle we were walking through, she took out a pen and some paper. And when we were leaving that night, she handed me 3 notes. I don't have time to share all of them with you this morning, but I want to share one. I'm not sure how clear it is on there for you. And this is what it said. To Tara, Psalm 119:97. Lord, I really love your law. All day long, I spend time thinking about it. Read it. Read. It's good. God will help you. I will sing to the Lord all my life. I will sing praise to my God as long as I live. And then get this. I hope you feel supported. I love you. I think you're a good mom. Yeah, that night, that 9-year-old helped me to rise because what she did for me was she helped me to remember that even in the midst of the hard, I still could sing praise to my Lord. And I could still trust him. He loved us. He loved me. He loved my daughter. And I could trust. And she reminded me, she was a compassionate truth teller that night. So let me ask you, when the hole is deep and the dirt of suffering is pouring down upon us as moms, or harder still, when it's pouring down upon our children, can we do what so few people do? Instead of letting suffering disfigure us and destroy our loved ones, can we treat it in that moment in time as an opportunity for perseverance and as a pathway to character that looks more like Jesus every day, and as an invitation to hope, in hope because the sure and certain finished work of Christ on that cross, Calvary? And finally, can we just be real with one another and receive mercy and grace and help in our time of need so that we and those we love can be people who rise? pray with me this morning. God, help us to trust you and the ones we love, that we can be people who persevere, grow in character, and are filled with an undying, eternal, resilient hope.